All right. Well, good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Got you on. So, I wanted to talk today a little bit about a concept that you and I have talked about in private, but it's kind of a new concept that it's an old framework that I've put a new concept around with the idea of paying rent. Now, my idea of paying rent is if you stop paying rent wherever you live, you get evicted. Things happen. Now, you could say, well, what if I own my property? Well, if you stop paying property taxes, same thing happens. So, we're using the concept of paying rent broadly. But it's this idea that you can't count on yesterday's successes or yesterday's efforts to forever live off of that. Every day that we live, whether it's for relationship or health or body or business, we have to pay rent. And so I wanted to kind of start with that topic and see what, with your life experience and what you've lived, what do you think of that?
Well, I have talked to you about this privately, and I think you're mentioning it now to an audience in a very broad sense. And so let's see if I understand it correctly. I think that what you're saying is that if in fact you live in an apartment and you don't pay rent, you will become quickly evicted. If you live in a home and you don't pay your mortgage, you will be quickly evicted. So the concept then becomes that there are consequences to inaction in the same way there are consequences to action. And so I think that's rather fundamental in its clarity. And so you're taking that metaphor and you're pulling it into the concept of life itself for an individual. So you're suggesting that if, in fact, using the rental metaphor, you do not pay a certain degree of responsible action, in your health, in your relationships, in virtually all areas of life, there will be a consequence. So I think this is brilliantly unassailable. And one of the things I most like about it is that underneath it is the concept that the world owes you nothing, you are entitled to nothing, but you must pay.
Right.
You must pay. And if you do not pay, you will pay one way or another.
That's right.
I don't know, elaborate more on it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's both unassailable, brilliant, thought-provoking, and very counterculture to sadly, to the world in which we live.
Yeah, I think the areas it's most helpful in because I think there are some things that everybody accepts. You have to pay rent or you get kicked out because that's our lived experience. I think where the concept is most useful is when you apply them to things such as happiness, success, things that for whatever reason, a lot of us think that once this happens, then I will be that. Once I make this much, then this happens. But then you realize that no, even these things require constant maintenance. If you make a ton of money, but you're spending, your account keeps getting smaller if you're not adding to it. If you reach a point of happiness, there's no such thing as a point of happiness. It's got to be something that you continuously maintain. And so I think the concept for me, I created this framework really for myself as a tool to take responsibility for the outcomes that I want in life. Really made sense to me once I started realizing that there are things that I thought were destinations as opposed to understanding this is all a journey. And there's a few ways that this came to my mind was one of my friends has a really good physique. I mean, I'm talking not a six pack. I'm talking like an eight pack.
Mm.
And we went on a camping trip together, and he had brought a cooler with him just for his stuff. And it was all healthy food, all these kind of things. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, we're camping. Why did you bring that stuff? We have steak, we have hot dogs, we have all these things." And he said, "No, no, I have to maintain this." And in our mind, we're like, "Well, he's already in shape." No, no, no. In his mind, he has to stay in shape, but to us, he's already in shape. Two different ways of looking at the same thing. And so that was interesting, and maybe that's why he has an eight pack and I don't. At that time, he had a clear understanding of this is a thing you have to pay rent for all the time. And so it's things like that, like health, happiness, relationships. A lot of times people get married and we have some of the highest divorce rates in America. I think it's 50% or more. And I think maybe that's the same thing. We get married and now we're supposed to be happy versus, no, you have to pay rent in a relationship. You have to do the things you don't want to do sometimes, or the things you do want to do, you do have to do more. So that is the part that I found it more useful because it's the places where you're not going to get an eviction notice. It's the places where there might just be a half a pound that you gained this week on the scale, another half a pound the next week, and then before you know it, you're 200 pounds overweight. Or it's, you talk to your partner a certain way and, it doesn't destroy the relationship right away, but it begins compounding and compounding. And I think those are the areas of life where applying this concept works the best because you don't have that immediate feedback loop where they come and tape something on your door and say, you're about to be evicted, paying attention to those sort of situations.
I think what you're saying is just really impressive, clear, particularly impressive for a man of your age, because sadly, we're living in a generation that I think has, what's a nice word for saying become utterly upside down? It is created with many young people, and by young, I mean, 40 or below, this thinking that I don't need to do much of anything, that I am a human, I am an American, I'm entitled, the world should give me. And I think this is about as dangerous a thought process as one can have. So, your remedy to this nauseating thought process, this suicidal thought process that the world owes me, this notion is as stupid, literally as stupid as not believing in gravity. Right? Imagine if you were holding in your hand a keychain, right? You're holding it in your hand and you took it and you held it up and you said, I don't believe in gravity. And then you dropped it. Well, the truth is that the world or gravity doesn't give a damn what you think. Gravity works whether you believe in it or not because it's a natural law. And what you're talking about, I think, is a natural law, beautifully stated, very cleverly worded, right? Concept of paying rent. But it is a natural law that's most needed at this time because so many people, not only 40 or below, everybody, this virus, this entitlement virus, has frankly infected all people, but it's particularly prevalent in our younger friends who, frankly, have been taught most of this idiocy in university and public education.
Right.
So anyway, I do want to mention something as it relates to your theory. And I think we've discussed it. I'm not quite sure, but Ernest Hemingway, the great novelist, wrote a classic novel called The Sun Also Rises. And I commend it to all of the people listening. If you're not familiar with Ernest Hemingway, you should be. If you're not familiar with The Sun Also Rises, you should be. But in The Sun Also Rises, there's this very powerful and becoming popular line in the novel. And these two men, these two characters in the novel are discussing bankruptcy. And one character says to the other, how did this bankruptcy occur? And the second character says to the first, well, in two ways. First, gradually, then suddenly. First, gradually, then suddenly. Now, isn't that profound? How did this occur? Now, you talk about weight gain. How did this occur? Well, actually, it occurred in two ways. First, gradually, then suddenly. How would that man lose his 8-pack? Well, I guess in two ways. First, gradually, then suddenly. So, anyway, I just think you're to be commended. In fact, I'm interested in asking you this question. You are a young person. We have we do this monthly intergenerational dialogue debate. It's not a debate, it's a dialogue. And we're trying to figure out how I and you of different ages, different generations see the world similarly and not so similarly. But I want to ask you, how did you, as a young person, become so wise in a generation of such stupidity and such lack of wisdom? How did you figure this out? Now, obviously, you're going to say, well, I pay rent. I don't know.
Yeah.
How did you reject the suicidal idiocy that your generation is so known for promoting?
I think it just starts with the concept of wanting a good life. If you want a good life, then you have to figure out what a good life looks like and how to get it. And if you want it, the excuses really don't matter because if your goal truly is to have a good life, whatever that means for you, then that means there are certain outcomes that must be materialized to get those. And excuses don't care. I'll supplement your Ernest Hemingway quote with a different part of society. Something someone told me from a different part of society. When I used to work at a criminal defense firm, as you can imagine, there was a lot of criminals. Those were our clients.
Yes. Yes. Generally, at criminal defense firms, you interact with lots of criminals. That is true, or at
And I
least alleged criminals.
That's right. And I remember we were in court one day. I was a law clerk at the time, and he said, "This is the most dishonest place I've ever seen." Court. He's talking about court. I think it's somebody had just testified. And I said, "So what's the most honest place you've ever seen?" He said, "The gym." And I said, "Why? How so?" He says, "Well, outside of the gym, everybody talks about I'm this, I'm that, I could do this, I could do that." He says, "But when you get to the gym and there's a piece of metal sitting on the ground, you either can lift it or you can't. There's no lying involved. We don't care about anything. You either can lift it or you can't. And that's it." So he said the gym's the most honest place you can be.
So such an interesting insight. Now, what I commend you for being one of these observant people. See, most people would have heard that and said, this guy's an idiot. A Jim is honest, a court is dishonest, he's an idiot. But you had the multi-dimensional capacity to observe that and understand the profundity of the remark. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just commend you.
that also was, a good reminder of excuses don't matter. If you want outcomes, the excuses really don't matter. The world doesn't care. If you try going talking to your landlord, talking about, I missed work because my car broke down and that's why I don't have the rent. But it doesn't matter. We're sorry, but you're still getting evicted. And so I think
By
to
the
answer,
way, I'm not sure they even say we're sorry.
they might not even say you're sorry. I think there's a lot of people that say they want a good life, but they truly are
Well,
not
they
willing to do
do.
what it
No,
takes.
no, I think they do. They just believe, they have come to believe the idiocy, the insanity of our time that a good life should be free. I'm entitled to it. Now, by the way, as you know, I think, I was born in New York City. Okay. I have an affection for my hometown, as everyone does. I spent the first 22 years of my life in New York City. I was born 2.5 miles north of Ground Zero. I love New York City. My city, the city that I love, the biggest city in America, at one time, arguably the most important city in the world, is now run by a man, a mayor, who sold to people, many, majority of young people, the idea that if you vote for me, I will give you free buses. Free, 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 free buses. Now, why these young people didn't say, excuse me, there is no free. Why this fundamental law of life that you clearly understand deeply has evaporated is worth asking. So I ask you, as a young person, how did this happen? How did now, it's not only young people, many have been conned into believing this, but how did primarily young people come to believe this utter suicidal idiocy where we elected this man as mayor of New York City? It's unthinkable.
If you observe different people doing different things, like I was talking about my friend who I went camping with that has an 8-pack, and you notice certain patterns in what they do that get the outcomes they want. If you begin looking at these things, someone who's a good painter wakes up early in the morning and they're working on their painting, and someone who, it's hard to ignore the reality that the outcome is dependent on the actions. That's just the reality of it. I've never seen anybody that had a great physique that didn't go to the gym. Now, you might say, oh, there might be some genetic freaks, but even those people, they might have a good metabolism, but they're not getting to the level some of these people are at. And it's hard to ignore when you see that people are doing something to get it. How can you ignore that?
Well, I agree with you, but you're not answering my question. My question is, in New York City, how did tens and hundreds of thousands of young people come to believe passionately, enthusiastically, insanely, that I am a New Yorker. I therefore deserve free buses. Free, free, free. How did this happen?
Well,
Why didn't they say, "Are you out of your mind? There is no free. What's wrong with you?"
right.
Why didn't they reject this insanity, and yet they bought it?
It's simple, and I think it's no different than the reason why people buy the secret lose 20 pounds in 7 days books, because
Because
to
snake oil has been sold forever.
that's it, it's hard to accept that, no, it's gonna take work to do what you wanna do, whatever that thing is, right? And so
Right.
if someone says, "Hey, psst, psst, come here. I've got something for you, Don't do what these idiots are doing. You can lose 20 pounds. Why you're gonna lose 20 pounds and it's just gonna take you 6 months."
But do you fault the education system of our country, but particularly the, universities and colleges? It's also this nonsense exists in a petri dish in high schools and public school. Do you fault I mean, have we have we educated a generation of fools, well-educated fools? So if a person graduates from a university, as many do, right, is there a high chance, particularly in elite schools, but not only, that they will be a well-educated fool?
Right. And I've heard that before. I'm not sure. I think one of the skills everybody should have is just critical thinking for themselves.
Yeah.
Because if you have
But
that,
that is, I agree with you, obviously, but let's be honest with each other. And by the way, on this broadcast together, there is only one of the 2 participants that graduated from a college. I didn't, you did. Today, to graduate from a college is to lose much of the common sense for aspirational insanity, which is well, you understand this better than
if I had to give an answer, even though I don't have an answer, it might be laziness to me. Because let's say you go through the education system and you're brainwashed, all that stuff, right? And you come out in the real world, if it's not getting the results that you want, then at that point, a change needs to happen, right? So you're
well,
either
you a change either look, if that happens, you're given 2 choices. 1, you can say, "This idiocy I was taught is totally self-destructive, and therefore I will change." That's one option. Or you can go to a hardware store and get a can of spray paint and go out and start protesting this vile nation and start putting signs up and protest that the world is, you know, they're trying to live, many are trying to live the world on their terms, not life's terms. And you, in this paying rent ideology, are trying to tell people to live life on life's terms.
I mean, your life is the embodiment of paying rent. I mean, when we've talked about in another podcast about where you came from, what you did, how you got there. Why did you accept, I mean, you've accepted that framework without the semantics of it
Yeah,
from
because well, in part, I'm arguing that I was raised in a generation, unlike you, in which if you believe stupid stuff, right, your the society, the culture, your parents, your authority figures, your teachers, your professors would have said, "Who told you that stupid stuff? What are you, an idiot?" Today, if you articulate stupid stuff, you're actually praised in many quadrants of a society. This is why, our society is so upside down. You literally can believe that the world rotates on the back of a turtle, and you can say that in a university, and the professor may well say, "I love turtles. What's wrong? I love turtles. Turtles are beautiful." I mean, it's so anyway,
I want to
it's
challenge one thing because I know
go.
you so well, okay? I don't disagree with you that society was different then. I mean,
Yeah.
I
I
guess you
mean,
could.
if you had said the stuff that you're hearing today to my father, what?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can call it different things, political correctness, whatever you want to call it, right? Knowing you, I don't know that that was the only thing. I don't think that you were the way you were because society was like that. You don't strike me as somebody who's just gonna do whatever society says, you know? You strike me as somebody who has something you're gonna do what you're gonna do that you think is correct,
Well,
regardless
I
of what
did
society
look,
says.
I you said something earlier, again, profound in my opinion, and I don't wanna spend the entirety of this broadcast praising you, but I think you say a lot of profound things, particularly for as an ambassador of your generation. You've heard me say, I believe, I'm not that bright, but I am above average at watching what bright people do, and that's been damn helpful. Now, to tell you a second secret, I'm even better, I believe, at watching what dopey people do. And damn it, that's even more valuable. So I observe the achievers and the non achievers. I observed people who had that which I desired. I observed people who didn't have that which I desired. And I don't think it takes Freud or Einstein to figure out don't do dumb shit, right?
Right.
Right. And whereas your generation today seems to embody, I'm going to do dumb shit because dumb shit is the way the world should be, not the way it is. And the world is fucked up. So I'm going to tear it down. Yeah.
Tell us how
Again,
you really feel, Michael.
I don't know your dad, right? You've discussed your dad. You didn't know my dad. My dad died last year at 101. We didn't know. I don't know your dad. But I just wonder, I have these fantasies. I wonder if I had said to my father, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, hey, dad, my father was born and raised in New York as well. And if I had said to my dad, Dad, you got to check out this guy running for mayor. It's really fantastic. He says that he's going to give us free buses. What the fuck, son? Get out. There is no free. What's wrong with you? And if somebody tells you it's free, you should be more suspicious. That's my dad. Now, I don't know what your dad would have said, but, you know,
And I think, knowing you again, Michael, is, I think your resentment towards it is because had you been the type of person that was sitting around and waiting for things to happen, your life would have turned out a lot differently. And so, if I had to guess, if we were to find a middle ground on that between, supporters of him and you, it might look, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, it might look like something like, don't make that your plan. Have a backup plan. Have a plan A,
yeah.
plan B, plan C, plan D. Don't wait for that to happen.
Well, I actually wouldn't have suggested have 4 plans. I would have suggested try as best you can with urgency and integrity to create a winning plan. If you're if you if somebody tells you to drink motor oil and you will lose weight. If you every week, I want you to drink a can of motor oil. I would hope that, when you watch 3 people before you die, you said resentment. It's an interesting term. My resentment is not in any way, my resentment is focused on a generation that's killing itself, that's hurting itself. See, when I look into the eyes of so many, I talk to many, many young people come to see me, talk to me, read my books, and they're broken. They're hollow. They're depressed. They're anxious. You see this. I mean, again, you don't need to be Freud or Einstein. So my resentment comes at what is hurting so many wonderful, interesting, smart people. They have gone on a path that is deeply deleterious to their future. So
Right.
that's the resentment, and I think you agree with that. I don't know.
No, no, I do, and I think, one other thing I would agree with that you've kind of said indirectly maybe is I do believe your generation was a tougher generation, anytime I hear something like, "Oh my god, we've never lived like times like these now," right? I just recently I was so curious to see if that's true, and I went on ChatGPT, our AI buddy, and it turns out it's not true. We actually live in terms of health, in terms of global conflict, we live in one of the best times that has ever we live in the best time that has ever existed. Not to say that there aren't health issues or global conflicts or all that, but you go back in your generation, the generations before you, World War II, World War One. There's a nuclear bomb that's actually dropped. There's the Great Depression, and I think there's
I think the
something.
difference today is a lack of grit and resilience among so many. Not all. You don't strike me as someone that lacks grit or resilience. And if I had the honor of talking to your father and mother, I would tell them that I think they get a good deal of that credit. But we have a generation that now look, if I said to if I said to every billionaire in the world today who had earned his money, not inherited it. I'm not talking about, Sam Walton's great
Right.
granddaughter, everyone who'd earned it. And I said, raise your hand if you think grit and resilience are vital. 100%
That's
would say
right. Yeah.
yes. And then raise your hand if you think the current generation is deeply lacking in any grit or resilience. Percent, not
Right.
94.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, the red light is flashing.
That's right. Yeah.
It's on. It's on. Now, fortunately, you have escaped, and you, by talking in this broadcast, are leading others of your generation to think a second time about an idiotic logic that will not bring them the result.
And I think this brings it to a good
And you're to
point.
be commended for that.
Thank you, and I'm gonna divert some of that commendation to my parents, and I'm gonna and it ties in well to what's going on today. So, as you know, Michael, my parents came to America from Iran,
I do.
and they came here to get educated and go back. That was kind of the thing that would happen back then. Your family would send you to get educated abroad, and you would go back. As you know, there was a revolution that happened, and then there
I
was a
did hear, by the way.
was that? Yeah, you
I
did
did
hear,
hear.
yeah,
Yeah.
and what that
Used to
meant.
be in all the papers.
That's right. And what that meant for people like my parents who were here was they didn't really have a country to go back to. Plan A, B, C, D, E, F is off the board now. And on top of that, what it meant was the families that were supporting them here, that was cut off immediately. I mean, it's done. And then what followed was a 10-year war between Iran and Iraq. And so I had the opportunity.
1,000,000. 1,000,000
That's right.
deaths.
That's right.
1,000,000, not 1,000, not 5,000, not 100,000, 200,000, 1,000,000 dead.
That's right. Absolutely. 1,000,000 dead, and then all the, ramifications that come from that, the men in the household dying who are the income providers, and you're talking survival. At that point, my mom was pregnant with me while this is going on. And so, I talked a lot to my parents about how did you guys succeed? How is this possible? What did you do? And my dad said, just you work hard. I had no choice. That was the only choice for me was to succeed.
And
And he dropped out of
survival.
college. He couldn't support college anymore. He dropped
But
out.
look at underneath that, dear brother. Look at underneath that grit and resilience
Yeah.
forced upon them by the fierce urgency of reality, right? Grit and resilience. Now, let me give you an example of how the world has changed. Okay. I am told that in 50% of the Fortune 500 companies in America today, get your birthday off paid.
Nice.
Now, if you had ever, can you imagine, though you never met my dad, can you imagine telling my father that? It is common to hear among young people today, young being under 40. What are you doing Tuesday? I'm not coming into work. Really? Why is that? It's my birthday. What are you doing? I'm going to Disneyland. What? I worked every birthday of my life.
Did you have 2 weeks of vacation every year, Michael? Paid
No.
vacation?
No. Listen, I do think that there is a should have time off, and if you're working at a company and they give you 2 weeks or even 3 weeks, I would encourage them not to take it all together, right? Because work, but that's up to them. But your birthday off? I'm not. I had a woman who I know not come to work about a month ago because her dog was sick, not dead, right? I would even say, and I understand that people have relationships with their pets that are very profound. I get it. But she didn't come to work because the dog she felt had a tummy ache. I don't know what to say. I mean, I don't know what to say. This is not the path that I think is reminiscent of a time in which common sense prevailed. It's just bizarre. So I love your paying rent. Now, can I ask a question? If somebody watching this, young person watching this, any person, older, younger, wanted to get more information from you about the paying rent concept, right? How would they do it? How would they? Now you said paying rent's like you own a house,
Right, right.
but I think you wrote up something that I saw that was quite impressive. Do you have anything that
Well, you
you
know what? Yeah,
could?
that's a great point. If you send me an email, hey, I'm happy to jump on a call. You can just email me. But if you want a copy of an outline I've created of this concept of paying rent that I really just created for myself,
Well, I
it
know
just
you shared it with me.
yeah, it just came up in a conversation with Michael. But Michael's point is that it might be helpful for a lot of people.
There's no question. There's no question. Even if someone disagrees with you, I beg them to envelop themselves in the concept because at least then you will have given it some consideration. You'll disagree. It's perfectly fine. There are many who listening to this that disagree with me. Think I'm an old-fashioned idiot who doesn't know what I'm talking about. But uh, I, how so you say people can email you
Yeah, so
or
you can email me at p@wavelawfirm.com. That's P like Peter at wavelawfirm.com,
I hope
WAVE lawfirm.com, and I'll put a link of it, actually
yeah,
at the
you
bottom.
should. You
Yeah.
should, and I would be very interested in a future broadcast. We do these about once a month, but I'd be very interested in people who reach out to you, young or old. By the way, parents should read this, think about it, because with all respect to many modern parents, in fact, the majority, how do I say politely? Father, by the way, today's Mother's Day.
Right.
I really should be careful what I'm saying to mothers. But mom, dad, you are screwing your kids up. And sadly, there may be some who you've already screwed up. Okay. You're not intending to do it, God forbid, but you are. And I think this paying rent concept is very worth your time, whether you're a young person and you've been screwed up or you're an older person anyway, that's my thinking.
All right, well, thank you, Michael. Pleasant conversation as always.
Good stuff.